Hi, Reddit Recapped here. Today I'm going to tell you a collection of stories titled I Feel Like I Killed My Mother. This is part 2. Enjoy our community stories. As always, stay safe and take care. My parents said they loved me. They said they cared. They said they wouldn't ever let me get hurt. They only told me that when their friends were around. I know the feeling of my father's hands against my skin far better than any little girl should. I know the taste of my blood far better than any little girl should. I know the feeling of cigarette butts smothered into my skin far better than any little girl should. You can hardly blame me for what I did. I used to sit alone at school. The other kids would sit with their little groups and chat about mundane things that don't matter. I would scarf down my food because I never knew when I would get another meal. I would count every second I had until I was forced back home. I would hide every scar I had with thick coats and scarves, even in the heat of summers, because I was afraid of what my parents would do if someone questioned them. I hated my life. I wanted more than anything to be in a loving family, to have friends like all of the other little girls, to enjoy school, to enjoy anything. I never got that childhood. My favorite days were when mother and father went on trips or out on dates because they always left me home, locked in the house with no means of communication. They were smart. They starved me just enough so that I couldn't fight back, but not enough for it to be concerning to my teachers. They hit me in places clothes could hide. They hit me just hard enough to be satisfied, but not hard enough to where it would hinder my day-to-day function. But my father didn't have to relent with his special assaults to my young body. Weekends are when he would do it, occasionally after school. He knew he'd never get me pregnant. I was too young, and he was going to take advantage of that. He used to only do it once a month, but as I grew closer to maturity, he began using me as often as he could. I don't know why he wasn't satisfied by mother. Oh God, I wish he had been. He wasn't gentle by a long shot. He liked to inflict pain. I won't go into detail of what he did to me, but I paid for his pleasure every day. Who would blame me for what I did? My mother wasn't any better. While my father took pleasure in sexual fantasies and physical pain, my mother preferred to mentally beat me down. Any opportunity she had, she'd take it, whether it had to do with simple things such as intelligence or scarring things such as my father's assaults. She would taunt me, make me feel worthless, and pick me apart until the pieces wouldn't fit back together again. That's where she went wrong, because now I don't have morals to hold me back. I didn't feel any remorse for what I did. I believe wholeheartedly they deserved every minute of what I did. I had been planning ahead to murder them on Saturday, March 30th, but things didn't go according to plan. I had been restlessly sleeping as I usually did when the opening of my door brought me out of my half-sleeping state. He got on top of me, but that day I wasn't having it. I had been so angry that day, and he made me snap. He too was getting frustrated with me, and when he shoved his groin in my face, expecting me to pleasure him, I bit, and I bit hard. He screamed like a girl, and I relished that moment for as long as I could. But a second later, his hands were cupping my throat tightly and threatening to crush my fragile esophagus. I flailed my fists against his head, throat, body, anywhere I could, but it wasn't enough. At that moment, I remembered my plan and how all the little tools I had planned on using were right next to my bed. I did this just in case I needed them, and I wouldn't be here if I didn't. I grabbed the brick I planned on knocking them out with, and I smashed it into the side of his face. His fat fingers immediately relented, and I took a moment to regain my composure and kick his fat body away from me. I knew my mother would enter soon, so I hid behind the door with the bloody brick in my hand. It took her a full 30 minutes to even try to look, and I only now realize she must have thought the scream was me. How funny. She was much easier to knock out, which I was thankful for since my arms had grown tired from even holding the brick. I pushed them both into chairs, which took a grueling 2 hours, and once they were finally in the guest room, I gathered my things to have fun. I picked up on the fear of my parents. My father feared needles, blindness, and germs. My mother feared blood, any physical pain, holes, and drowning. I didn't have all of the gadgets I had hoped for, but what I had would suffice. I started by splashing hot water onto both of my parents, which immediately got them up and kicking. While they were still drowsy and confused, I duct taped their mouths shut. I didn't want my fun to be ruined because of their loud mouths. I then grabbed the drain cleaner and I poured it over my father's eyes. I was careful not to splash myself or other areas of his body. I loved the way he wrote, and I could see how panicked he was, how that fear he made me feel was reflected in his own face. I made sure the lights were on so he knew just how damaged his eyes had gotten. It was fun to taunt them. I then moved to my mom. I had been hoping to get more toys to help inflict creative ways of pain, but the time had come much sooner than I had anticipated. It was March 12th when this happened, a day ago. Anyways, I took a simple knife and I started carving holes into her skin. I only cut through the skin and I made sure they were small and close together. I got frustrated when she kept closing her eyes, so eventually I cut her eyelids off. I noticed she was starting to gag, so I pulled off her duct tape just long enough for her to throw up all over herself. Then I resealed it. The putrid bile spewed onto her clothes gave me a grand idea. I covered my hands with my long-sleeved shirt and I scooped up the mashed dinner that my mother had thrown up. I waved it under my father's nose so he could smell what it was, and then I proceeded to smear it all over his face. I could tell this really affected him because he started to hyperventilate and looked like he was about to pass out. He ruined the fun when he did, but at least it was a good laugh. One of my little toys were sewing needles. My parents had to sew up wounds when they opened in my skin. I woke my father up by slowly pushing all of them into his neck, but not enough for them to cause any major bleeding, just enough to wake him up. I made sure my mom was watching when I did this, and especially this next part. I grabbed a baking pan and I slammed it into his neck to drive the needles into his skin. It worked far better than I had planned. One of them hit his jugular vein. Look at me, I paid attention in science class. I was a bit disappointed that he died so soon, but I still had the opportunity to finish my fun with my mother. So I did. I grabbed a small, dull kitchen knife my mother had used frequently, and I cut small little cuts all over her body until the blood mixed together to paint my mother's skin red. She looked like she was going to vomit again, so I let her. Obviously, she didn't think that through, because the puke only made the cuts worse. I didn't really care, because I was going to kill her anyway. I thought about how I wanted to do it for a few minutes. I knew that I was going to suffocate her, but I didn't know how at the time. I knew I couldn't hang her because I had nowhere to tie a rope, and I didn't have the strength to choke her myself. Cutting her throat was far less satisfying, so in my mind, that left one option. I had to hit her in the head again because she wouldn't stop thrashing, but after that, I took a hammer to all of her limbs back so I would have the advantage. My frail arms weren't strong enough to break her bones, but at least the bruising was painful. The bruising, combined with the rushing water I set in the tub, woke her up quickly. When she was all tied up, I let the tub fill up with her head in it. She couldn't even hold her breath for very long because the tub wasn't even half full when her face started turning purple. I lifted her head out and I put her face back in. I did this 3 times until I got bored of her, and I held her head underwater until she died. Her face turned so many colors, pale to scarlet to purple and then to gray after several minutes. When I was done, I dragged her back to father. I had some fun hacking their limbs, which was tiring but worth it. Eventually, I fell asleep out of exhaustion beside both of them, and I even got to take a hot bath for the first time in my life. When I woke up this morning, I had to deal with the problem of their bodies. I spent all day trying to figure something out, and when I searched the garage, I had found something that gave me an idea: gasoline. I decided to burn their bodies until you couldn't tell if I had even altered them. Then I doused the entire house and lighted up. So that's what I did. I loved watching their bodies cook. It smelled horrible, but I had expected a horrible stench from them. No surprise there. But the fire was beautiful, and it's even beautiful now when I'm looking at my house in flames. It's taken the firemen a long time to get here, so I can write all of this down. I live in a rural place, so I can't blame them. I didn't call them, so I'm guessing it was one of my neighbors who did. I can hear the sirens right now. I can't wait to live my new life with my new family. Wish me luck. This marks the end of the sequel of the collection of stories titled I Feel Like I Killed My Mother. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe to see more videos like this. Turn on your notifications and leave a comment to help the channel grow. Thanks for watching.